What's up, guys? It's Ron from Rohde Law. Welcome to another episode where we're going to talk about investing in truck parking. We've got John Borsellino of Freight Ninja. He is the CEO and founder. Why they started in the Midwest, but they're nationwide in terms of operating and owning truck parking lots.
So I started out in transportation, right? Back in 2014, I started a regionally run trucking company based out of Chicagoland. Started getting a lot of requests from customers and asking, hey, can I, use some of your yard space and, I'll pay you, monthly. So started to do that, right? And I blinked and half our yard was filled with other people's assets and it was covering the lease payment on the site and I still had enough room for my own equipment, right? So kind of stumbled upon this month-to-month truck parking model and operation and started targeting sites to lease just to run that model. While I was still really heavily involved in the trucking side of things, organically grew it to about 7 locations here in Chicagoland. And early 23, end of 22, decided that I was going to start Freight Ninja. And
So you're kind of the accidental landlord
yeah, exactly.
that you're really helping solve a problem for them, right? You're giving them a solution where to park their equipment when they don't have a ton of options, right? I mean, is that true in Chicagoland as well? As I'm in Dallas, right? DFW has a lack of paid parking or any kind of parking.
Yeah, I feel like maybe it's just because I'm here, but Illinois and Chicagoland it's probably the toughest markets to crack into. Strict zoning code when it comes to heavy industrial parking for trucks and any really industrial equipment. We were fortunate enough to get in early, really build something that made sense for both parties.
That's awesome. All right. So you've kind of walked us how you started, and those were for sites that you owned or leased directly. But now you've kind of gone a new direction. I guess tell us about some of the partnerships that you guys offer for industrial landowners that maybe are looking to generate some income.
Early on, got some pretty tight relationships with groups that are investing in this type of, it wasn't iOS before, right? But now it's iOS. We have our own acronym now, which is cool. I was pre-iOS, started working with a lot of these groups that were buying outdoor storage facilities. They trusted us as an operator. At first, we started off as just a tenant, leasing their sites and operating. And then, it came up, why don't we do like a management style revenue share? So, right, it helps you in the beginning during your stabilization period, and we get to participate in the upside on the back end of your parking model. Through those relationships, was able to scale rather quickly as these groups went and bought in different markets.
Okay, so you're partnering on a new acquisition, but what's the, I guess, investment thesis for that investor who's buying this dirt and partnering with you guys? Are they looking to build a building on here? Are they looking to find a net lease operator, or what's your joint exit then?
So the ultimate goal, obviously, for them is, to get a net lease, long-term lease on the site, right? That's their model. That's what works for them. The banks haven't really gotten too comfortable with the managed revenue share type style operating, which some are starting to warm up to. But really, at the end of the day, I was able to work closely with these guys and say, hey, let's start out doing this revenue share type. The end goal for us is always to lock it up long term, and I know your end goal is always to have a long term net lease. Right. So whether that's 6 months, 12 months, I can always, go back to them because we have that relationship and partnership and say, hey, we're ready to ink that long-term lease.
Gotcha. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. Tell us, I guess, how you handle some of the Capex, because I'm assuming these sites are not turnkey for outdoor storage and or truck parking. So who pays for those costs if you're not the long-term tenant and if you're not the landlord, or you don't know?
Depending on the structure, a lot of what we've been targeting lately has been a lot of turnkey sites, but in the early days, we either would offset it on a long-term lease with abatement months where we would lay out some of the Capex to get the site ready, in return abate those months to the back end so we could get some time to recoup our investment up front and get stable, or through TI money, Some landlords will give you, tenant improvement money to get the site to where it needs to be. The ones we own, obviously, that's coming out of your pockets, right? And then the management structure, that all falls back on to the owner of the property.
Yeah, and I think it's really fascinating. You mentioned earlier it's a partnership. So in those scenarios, what's a sample revenue share? I mean, is it anything? Is it pure top line? Are there any expenses taken off that top line or?
Yeah, so it's based off the top line, right? Our fee comes off of the gross revenue we, produce on the site. Obviously, there's operational costs for us on the management side that, we shoulder, right? We've got our employees, our software, um, you know, different technology we need to implement on site that, is no cost to the owner. But when it comes to CapEx, the month to month expenses tied to that facility, whether it be, the electric bill or internet to the site, that all goes back to the.
Okay, so with a sample property owner, like again, you're in on this 6 month or rolling 12-month deal. When do you split, I guess, to the landlord? You're saying you deduct those expenses before the split, or is it after on your ledger?
So our fee comes off of the gross revenue. So it does 100,000
Hmm.
in parking revenue. We take our fee based on that, and then the rest of the expenses are also.
Okay, okay. So when we say splitting, it's flipped a little bit. You're saying a lion's share of the net income goes to the landlord. They're the
Yeah,
owner of the property. They're getting
correct,
what you're managing is saying, look, we'll pay the electricity bill, we'll pay the internet bill, but we're taking a fee off of the 100 grand. Add all the expenses that we pay for. We manage the accounts payable, and then you get what's left over at the end. And
correct.
as
We
the
dispersed
landlord,
it.
they're essentially getting a net lease tenant because they're not lifting a finger, but it's a little bit variable depending on the success of the property. But at least Freight Ninja's cut is predetermined. You guys make more money if top line grows, not
Correct,
necessarily. You know, you guys don't take a profitability risk other than the landlord saying, "I'm done with you guys. I'm going to boot you off."
correct.
Okay.
It's minimal expense that goes into operating one of these, from the owner side. Outside some utility bills and a dumpster and sometimes a porta-john or whatever you're using, for that. There's not much more that goes into it.
I mean, again, speaking to the zoning, you throw up something casual like just drop a dumpster, but then you got to consider you have the dumpster enclosure, and then you're drawing plans, and then you're constructing this little cinder block with a gate, opaque front gate and that sort of thing, and then the location of the dumpster. The landlord's like, well, I don't know if I want you to build it there, so it's funny. Yes, it's like little things. Code may not allow a porta john on site, unless it's a temporary construction thing for less than 6 months at a time. Uh, but yeah, these are the things I like. I think that you guys handle for the property owner, so they don't have to figure it out. You guys would just take care of it, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, we've been at this for some time now, so it's been cool to kind of see the evolution um, of truck parking, right? Historically, early on, very mom and pop run. Someone inherited a piece of land that may have been, a good location, lay down some gravel and park some trucks on it, and then very quickly municipalities and different cities and states have, kind of put their foot down and said, hey, no, we want paved or we want permanent structure. We need landscape architecture with, meshing. We don't want to be able to see any of this equipment. So yeah, I mean, early on it was lay some gravel down and go, and now it's become a little more involved than that.
But I think it's true nationwide. I mean, the opaque screening requirements, no outdoor storage can be visible from a public right of way. That's such standard ordinance language. I mean, it's getting copied and pasted in every single city. And I think it's either going to raise costs to run a truck parking site, or it's going to push the drivers really far out of town to where they have to charge a lot more to do these runs because parking is 45 or an hour away.
We're starting to see here in Illinois a lot of different, taxes being placed on the operation as well, which, you know, being a larger operator here in the state, you can't fly under the radar, right? You got to pay, right? We're getting hit sometimes from the city, state, and county level for taxes
You're
on the
talking about
park.
for sales tax?
Yep.
Yeah. So we collect and we remit sales tax, and I do hear people grumble about it, but I just tell them, look, the law is the law. And I can point them to, the statute. It's really clear: paid parking, shall charge sales tax. And I'm like, just because somebody else does it illegally doesn't mean that we're not going to. But yeah, it's pretty significant when these drivers are sensitive to $10, $20 a month difference. Sales tax is $20 right there.
Yeah. A lot of these cities are putting an in lieu of tax bill in where you have to pay a fixed amount per parking stall so they can recoup that tax revenue.
Yeah, I've never heard of that type of tax structure, and that's only at the city, right? That's not a state.
I haven't seen it at the state yet, just at the city level. Yeah.
That's wild. That's wild. Well, in Texas, we don't have that, thankfully. But I'm sure if other cities see it, they're like, "Hey, how'd you do that? We'd love more revenue from these low coverage lots and try to make up for the property taxes." So, what do you think are some of the major challenges coming for the industry? Because I want to get your opinion on like electric trucks versus autonomous driving. I mean, do you think about that? Do you think it's going to have an impact?
I mean, personally, I think we're still a ways away from seeing it go completely electric, completely autonomous. But at the end of the day, for me, the amount of equipment that's pouring into the country through the ports, on the rails. I mean, we've got customers that are just storing, 300 trailers, no power units attached, right? So this equipment's still going to need to be stored, right? It's not going anywhere. Larger trucking companies, even, if they have 150, 200 trucks, they may have 1,500 trailers in their fleet where they need to store trailers. I think regardless of which direction this goes, you know, we're still going to have a need for storage of heavy industrial equipment. We're still going to have a need for the parking. It's kind of scary to think how close we are to autonomous trucking, right? I still think that you're going to see heavy demand for outdoor storage.
Yeah, and I think some of the analogies that I've had is just, even if we have electric, that doesn't even change anything. They're still going to have to park. We will be the types of operators that will install charging stalls.
Yeah, you just
And
got to
it's
adjust.
no big difference except that we're going to charge more and we're going to have to put some capex out. But we can do that. We can run the math. We have enough cash flow or availability of credit that says, yeah, trucks are moving to EV. We'll install chargers, and same story. If anything, I think it might make us more attractive because there'll be less noise and pollution at our truck parking lots.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never even thought of that, right? We've had different cities that say, hey, your trucks can't start between these hours, right? Because
Right.
you may be close to residential. So no, yeah, that's a good way to look at it. But yeah, I mean, either way, this, like you said, we could lay out the capex to put the infrastructure in place to accommodate, charging. At the end of the day, this is all going to roll back down onto the driver. We want this to be as affordable as possible. I know what it takes because I've been on the trucking side of things for these owner operators, or these truckers or small outfits that, especially in a time like today where when this is the worst trucking market I've lived through in my transportation professional life. They need every dollar they could get right now.
I think it's great. I mean, your experience again speaks to a lot of people that have seen other people struggle to look for parking, and if they can buy a 4 acre little parcel and just manage it for their own fleet plus rent it out to others, that's I think there's a lot of interest in that from people nationwide, and so they look at you and say, look, if John did it, we can just start small and manage plus our own with our own equipment parking on there, because I think that's great. I mean, it sounds like that's something that motivates you. is to give those drivers more options, and help them save money, as opposed to, it's probably the biggest cost is wasted time, right? If they have to look for parking everywhere, even if it is the same price, that's just the inefficient use of their time, versus they know they can go to Freight Ninja, they get a consistent price, and you're always going to be there,
Right.
day
It's,
after
you
day.
know, they don't have to stress about that. It's their space. They could cancel it on 30 days notice, and it's peace of mind for them to know, hey, if I'm in Chicago and I know I'm going to have to either lay over in Chicago or I live locally in Chicago, I'm going to have a safe and secure spot to park my asset because that asset's their livelihood. They don't want, anything to happen to that because now they can't earn and provide for their family.
Know, are there other markets that you love or are super interested in, maybe that you're not actively looking at, but what do you like in the country?
So some markets, it's just been a little hard to pencil to get into, um, more than others. The Southeast, I've got my eye on a lot of different, transportation hub cities and port cities in the Southeast. Really, everywhere we've opened, we've seen demand, right? So it just goes, that speaks volumes to the amount of shortage that we're actually experiencing in this country, right? And as we keep going back to these cities and municipalities, as they continue to crack down on it, it's just going to become more of a headache for drivers to try to find these, secure places to
I
park.
mean, I think the latest statistic, and I keep parroting it, and correct me if you have something more updated, is like 3 million trucks are registered right now on the road, and there's only like 311,000 paid parking spaces. And I get it. A lot of those guys are on the road and rest stops and, the free loves kind of thing. But do you think that is still accurate? Are there more paid parking spaces? Do you think trucks are coming off?
I mean, you're seeing more inventory for parking pour into the market, right? I mean, it was as easy as for me to just open a yard and put a sign out front and wait for the phone to ring, right? Now, I look at those statistics. I think a lot of it is based off of the nightly demand for parking or truck stop demand for parking. You
Okay.
forget about all the other equipment that goes along, with trucking, right? I mean, if there's, I don't know what the stat, you just said how many trucks registered?
3 million.
So how many trailers are there also to
Right.
go along with that, right? I mean, we're in trucking, we understand that, a lot of our routes we run, it requires a drop and hook scenario where you may need to dedicate 3, 4, 5 trailers to one truck to accomplish that route. I mean, there's even more equipment than that.
Yeah, so it's crazy. I think that's what's fueling all of this macro demand, and our job as investors and as partners and helping everybody do this is bringing the publicity level up to where drivers know they can look for Freight Ninja. Or, I'm sure there's people that haven't heard of you yet, and you're going to be a saved. Do you guys have an app yet, or are you just online?
We're working on an app right now. For me, we'll let some of the other groups kind of spend their time and money on technology. We just want to dial in our relationships with the trucking community, and they know when they pick up the phone and call us, we're going to answer and we're going to provide a great service.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. I think it's a great approach. Is don't worry about vanity metrics. It is about every customer that you interact with, do a great job, deliver what they need, do what you say you were going to do. And then that's the way you build your reputation, just one at a time. I mean, there's no other way to do it.
I mean, for me, when I was working more on the trucking side, it was like, I'm calling you because I don't need extra work on my plate, right? So a lot of guys are wearing a lot of hats in transportation, and if I tell them, hey, go to the app and do this, and they're like, no, we just want parking. Send me an invoice, right? So don't overthink it, right? It's provide a good service and give them what they need without adding extra work.
And you see all the drivers now. You know why they always have huge headsets. I feel like they're one of the most easily recognizable, identifiable guys. Walking through a gas station. I'm like, oh, you drive a truck because you're walking around with this
Yeah.
microphone, like with the foam padding. I'm like, you're the TV reporter or you're a truck driver.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice, John? Like, if you have some words of wisdom, people that want to get started in this space, should they buy land? Should they partner with you guys? Should they start small to store their own equipment? Like, what would you give advice to your younger self if you could go back in time?
If I could give advice to my younger self, I would have bought everything in sight. 10 years ago when pricing was, I think it's gone up 3 times since, when I first started. But if you want to self-operate, find a nice piece of land, where you see high demand and you could self-operate. It's just, what goes into this. It's a full-time gig. It's not something you're going to do on the side or half-ass. It's 100%, customer service nonstop. I mean, I was just crazy enough as my young self to wake up every time the phone rang at 2, 3 in the morning and sign somebody up for $200, right? So, um, I mean, I do think that the managed model where, you engage a group like ourselves, right? We have 43 locations right now. It's the same 8, 9 owners that own all the land, right? Because we've gotten them comfortable with it. We've proved ourselves then, over and over again, and they're comfortable with the model now. So I think the advice would be, you know, if you're going to self-manage it, make sure you put your full time and dedication into it. If not, engage a group like Freight Ninja, and we'll help you out.
Awesome. Well, John, I really appreciate having you on. I mean, I love your backstory, and looking forward to big things from Freight Ninja and seeing you guys coast to coast. But I'll drop your contact info if people want to get a hold of you guys, website and phone number or whatever you want. So if you're a driver, check out Freight Ninja for their locations, and maybe you can find a parking space.